The cost of a war is tremendous. But before I go into the economics of war, let me tell you, India is an extremely responsible nation, and I think the countermeasures to this terrorism from the cross-border will be strategic, measured, and definitely intended to achieve its objective. As the warmongering and the fear of a war lurks among Indians and Pakistanis, let's talk about how much does it cost to actually conduct a war. While I'm not a defense expert, I wouldn't be able to put an exact number, but let me tell you some numbers which will shock you. In Kargil, when we had a war, the rough estimates were the expense on the personnel was somewhere around 10 to 15 crores a day. Now, we are talking about 25, 26 years ago in 1999. Currently, rough estimates talk about anywhere between 1,000 to 3,000 crores per day. Yes, you heard it right. It's between 1,000 and 3,000 crores per day. Why? Because all the ammunition, the technology, the personnel and the missiles and the systems are extremely costly. Just to give you an example, the BrahMos missile roughly cost 95 to 110 crores, one shot of fire. You need to understand that a war can be multi-pronged, it can be wrong, and it can actually have an impact of much more than just the cost of the artillery. What can really happen is there is a cost of economics in terms of business, there is a cost of livelihood, there is a cost of allied industries, there is a cost of rebuilding, and not to forget, there is a cost of life. If there is a war, it might be strategic and it might be targeted in ensuring that Pakistan never dares perpetrate terrorism in our soil to wean out, unfortunately, innocent civilian lives. The cost of war in terms of life is absolutely not measurable and not worth it by any chance. So a rough estimate of a 6-month war can be as high as 3 to 5% of GDP. Do not forget, India and Pakistan's situation in terms of economic ability and monetary capacity and the power of wealth is way different. With enough amount of confidence, I can tell you that India's foreign exchange reserve is nothing but at least 50 times higher than Pakistan's reserve. As we are all aware that Pakistan has been going around the world with a begging bowl to IMF and various countries to support its daily livelihood and to keep its foreign exchange reserve and to keep its imports alive, and the per capita income and the industry, the economy, the GDP being in tatters, Pakistan really cannot afford a war. But despite that, the bravado and the absolute chest thumping that the Pakistani have been doing on media or otherwise seems to show that they are all ready for a war and they can bear it. But the truth is far away from that. Pakistan cannot bear the brunt of a war, neither morally, neither economically, nor in any fashion. To be honest, if it's an all-out war, I think India has huge advantages strategically, wealth-wise, personnel-wise, artillery-wise, and probably even support worldwide. Having said that, the defense budget allocating about $80 billion, while a Pakistani defense budget is about $10 billion, we are almost 6 to 8 times the number in terms of defense budget. And remember, with the foreign exchange reserve that's close to $700 billion and Pakistan's barely managing to float at $4-5 billion and moving ahead to 15 with a begging bowl and conditions posed by IMF, I think Pakistan, if purely they stood on their own wealth and capacity to sustain a war, wouldn't last a month. But having said that, geopolitics is absolutely tricky. There can be countries who can come in support of Pakistan, but remember the fear that Pakistan should have after whatever happens whether it is a surgical strike, strategic strike, a war, I don't know. I'm not the person in action or taking any decisions. So obviously, whatever happens, the outcome should be terrorism in India should completely stop. And I'm sure the cost of this war will be extremely long and painful for both the countries. But yes, we can strategically probably afford a lot more money on the table. Having said that, Pakistan will be reduced to economic dust if they get into a full-fledged war. As they say, nobody wins in a war, everybody is a loser. But I'm sure that we as a responsible nation will ensure that we give them befitting reply, at the same time are able to manage our cost and not go foolhardy. I'm extremely confident of the government of the day and that India as a nation is not warmongering, so we will be sensible. Remember that the economic cost is not only the cost actually involved in the war, but what happens to GDP. Not to forget the allied impact of a war on economics, namely the stock market. Billions of dollars will get wiped out on the stock market. So if the Sensex is today at 75,000 or 80,000 and let's say 10 or 20% wipes off, we are back to 60, 65,000. That pulls us back to about 2.5, 3 years, and that strategically means 10, 20, 30 lakh crore wiped off on market capitalization. What happens to rebuilding those cities which are destroyed? Few million to few billion dollars. Industries destroyed? Unbelievable. Cost of life? Immeasurable. So if I had to put down a statistics on the cost of a war, absolutely impossible. The true cost of a war is peace for a lifetime. Having said that, I believe the government will do a responsible act of doing what it should do, it must do, give a befitting reply and stop the terror forever.